Okay, in this video I'm going to land the standard DeltaGlider, and I've created a scenario. This is actually pretty old, about a year ago, and it just has the DeltaGlider in orbit shortly after taking off from Cape Canaveral, and I'll explain here when it loads up. So in this scenario you can see that I've got a circular orbit around 237 kilometers, and at the moment I am about halfway around. This is the point that I saved it. It's not quite halfway around, and I did that on purpose. That would give me a little bit more time. So let me select Cape Canaveral. So I'm 15.78, and counting up, getting close to the halfway point. It reaches the halfway point when you're around 18.5 to 19.5, somewhere in that range. And that's when I will do the retrograde maneuver and then burn down the periapsis. So this takes a little while, just due to the fact that you can't really do a lot of time acceleration when you're landing, when you're coming through the atmosphere. It's so sensitive. It's such a delicate process that any amount of time acceleration just kind of really messes things up. But at least for now, we're up in orbit, and we can take care of some of these maneuvers with time acceleration. So I'll just kind of walk through the basic process. At least this is kind of how I do it using the standard DeltaGlider. And in my opinion, the standard DeltaGlider, it just is a really bad vessel for reentry. Just that whole process, the deorbit, reentry, landing, this is just not a good vessel for it because it just doesn't have the autopilots that you need. But it's possible. So I'm just going to accelerate time here, go out to 100x until I get to the halfway point. And I know I'm getting close, so let me go down to 10. And the easy way to know that you've reached the halfway point is this number will stop going up and it'll start going down. So I'm at 19.85, and I think, because I've done this scenario a couple times, I think that's the point where it actually starts counting backwards. But that's basically what I look for, is just when the distance, yeah, it's counting backwards now. So now I know I'm halfway around the globe. So I'll go ahead and hit retrograde, and I'll use T just to speed that up. And this burn is quite small. It doesn't take much at all to get your periapsis down. And to do this, the usual target that you're going for is about 40 kilometers. So we'll go ahead and do that. And I'll use a little bit of translation to get the rest of it. And it doesn't have to be exact, but I like nice round numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and get it exactly at 40.00. And then we can go back to the prograde position. Now at this point, my altitude is 236 kilometers, so I'm still well up in space, and I don't have to worry about atmospheric drag. So I can go ahead and accelerate time until I get to the point where the atmosphere starts to become an issue. The terminology for that is the entry interface. That's the altitude where you need to, button down the hatches, so to speak, and, prepare for entry. And that altitude is approximately 120 kilometers. That's the standard altitude for entry interface. In practice with Orbiter, you can probably go down to even 100 kilometers before you really have to worry about it. But if you want to follow more standard protocol, then you want to go to about 120 kilometers, and then you can start preparing your reentry. So let me go ahead and accelerate time until my altitude is down to about 120 kilometers. And I hit 130, I'll back down to 10x so that I don't overshoot. And you'll notice if you do overshoot, by the way, that your periapsis altitude will immediately start going down, because once you get below 120-ish kilometers, then you are getting atmospheric drag. You can see it right there. Now I'm at 39.99, so I'm already starting to get a little bit of drag from the atmosphere. So basically I'm at entry interface now. Let me go to the prograde position just to get everything centered. Now if you had the radiator extended, which I don't in this scenario, just because the standard DeltaGlider doesn't actually make use of the radiator realistically, or at least it doesn't actually accomplish anything to have it open, so I generally ignore it. But if you have it open, then you want to close it at this point. If you have retro doors open, you want to close those. You want to prepare for the atmosphere at this point. So now I can go to level out, and I'll bring up aerobrake. Switch over to rotation. And what I'm going to do here, first of all, I'm just going to yaw myself out and get myself level. Okay. Now I'm going to use aerobrake to help me with my correct angle of attack for making sure that I guess I should say making sure I run out of energy when I reach Cape Canaveral. And the way to do that, the easiest way, click on the PG button. That'll bring up this screen, and then PRJ, and you should be looking at something like this. Now I'm going to have to turn off the level horizon. And this part's a little awkward just because of the fact that the DeltaGlider just again doesn't have good autopilot systems. So I'm going to use the angle of attack hold that aerobrake has, and it's not very good. So I'm actually pitching down very slowly, very, very slow pitch, and you can see this here is closing in on Cape Canaveral. What I want to do is, as soon as that's closed in, I want to click this AOA button and have it hold the angle of attack for me, and that's going to be when the angle of attack is approximately 1.8. And because of the sensitivity, it's a little difficult to get it exact, but I'll explain here what I'm doing as I'm doing it. Pitch down a little more, and right about it's going the wrong direction. Yeah, it's so sensitive. So now I'm pitching up just a tad. You can see this number is getting smaller. At about 1.8-ish. Oh, that's pretty close. So now I've got the angle of attack set where I want. And all I can do now is I've just got to ride this out. I'm at 96 kilometers. And what I kind of want to mention here is you're going to see this bounce all over the place. And that's because the standard DeltaGlider doesn't have the ability to shift the center of gravity. And it doesn't have, and because the aerobrake MFD AOA hold just doesn't hold very well. So this is going to bounce all over the place. What I really am more concerned about for now is this, my vertical speed. It's holding at 106, I should say negative 106, and then negative 105, and it's going to hold close to this number. It's going to continually go down. It'll get closer to zero, but it'll be very gradual. As long as this is steady, as long as this is holding, then I know that my descent into the atmosphere is relatively smooth, irrespective of however wonky this is getting. So as this bounces all over the place, I'm not going to worry about that because this is holding pretty steady. And there's nothing I can do for now except wait. You don't want to use time acceleration because that will make all of this go completely crazy. And this will stabilize in a little bit. It's just we're reaching a point of the atmosphere where this is trying to do all kinds of compensation, and it just, because the programming, I guess I would call it, or I'm not actually sure what you would call it, but basically this is just not a good autopilot. That's all there is to it. You can attempt to keep this a little more stable by hitting kill rotation every now and then, and just, kill, let it go, kill, let it go, and that'll help keep this from bouncing around so much. But it really doesn't matter. As long as this is holding, that's more important for now. We'll deal with this part of it a little bit later. But again, if you want to try to help baby it a little bit, you can kind of hit kill and let it go. And if you can find the exact sweet spot, so to speak, you can press kill rotation and just hold it, or not hold the button but down, but just let it stay down, and that'll kind of help keep this. But right now that's not a good position for me to have the kill rotation in because it has this going way out. But there's some things we can keep an eye on. If we bring up map MFD, we can kind of take a look and see how this is coming along. I also like to look at base sync. Shows me the distance to the base and my ground speed. And you'll notice the ground speed will hold at a very high number basically until you're almost all the way to the base. I mean, you're going to lose very, very little velocity until you're almost on top of the base. But then when you're almost on top of the base, you're going to lose an incredible amount of velocity really fast. And I can also see using this MFD that my distance to the base is basically right on. That shows me that I'm 1.8 kilometers off, but for all intents and purposes, you're there. Anything within 20 or 30 kilometers and you're basically right at the base. By the time you get to the base, you don't actually want to be heading dead center toward the middle of it anyway, because you got to land on the runway. So eventually I actually want to be quote unquote missing the base by even actually 40 or 50 kilometers, so that I can line up and land on the runway. So for now I'm just enjoying the ride. You can't really control anything Any attempt to control anything at this point will just throw you wildly off course. I don't make any adjustments to the heading, or rather to the pitch, I mean. If you unclick this at this point, it's going to send you around the whole planet. So don't try to adjust this after you've reached entry interface and have it set. Just leave it set. Even though this shows that I'm overshooting Cape Canaveral by a landslide, I'm just not even going to worry about that for now. I can make small corrections, well, which are actually large corrections, using the air brake. But I will do that a little later on once I'm closer. But yeah, if you undo the AOA, you're gonna miss. You're gonna miss completely. There's virtually no way to undo it and then get it set again when you're this low in the atmosphere. It's basically impossible. You'll burn up, or you'll bounce back out into space. So just leave it set. No matter what's happening here, just leave it set. And while I'm cruising in, take a look at some of the different views. Can zoom out using page up. Still got a long way to go. And just I like to periodically look at everything. This is how far away I am from the base. This is my ground speed. You can also look at the flight data monitor if you have that module enabled, and that will show you the heat, which I think is interesting. Except it's looks like there it is. Free stream temperature, I think, is what I'm looking for. I believe the temperature starts to get, you don't really notice much temperature until you get into the around 51 kilometers. I believe that's when the things really start heating up. Now, due to how much aerobrake is showing that I'm going to miss Cape Canaveral by, I'm going to go ahead now that I'm getting close-ish to the base. I'm going to go ahead and extend the air brake a little bit. I kind of assume in real life this would actually destroy the vessel, but the DeltaGlider is pretty much impervious. You can see when I extend the air brake, it sends this all the way back here somewhere. So now I can close it, and you can see that's got me a little closer. And basically I will continue to play with the air brake to try to dial this down. And that's why I don't mess with the AOA. I use the air brake instead. I just don't think that the air brake is terribly realistic because of the speed in the atmosphere. I believe that, and I could be wrong, but I think extending the air brake would actually just shred the vessel. Extend the air brake again. Give it a couple seconds. Close it back up. can see each time I do that, it gets this a little closer to the center. And the closer I get to the base, the more I'll be concerned about having this right on the money. Close the air brake again. Basically, each time I close the air or open the air brake, you'll see that my velocity reduces more quickly. Like right now, it's coming down at maybe 1 tick per second, but when I extend the air brake, it's giving me like 2 or 3 clicks a second. And you can also see that if you leave the air brake open too long, you'll come up short big time. You could end up landing in, Texas instead of Florida. So you got to be very careful not to leave the air brake open too long. But otherwise, all this is pretty automated. I'm not controlling anything manually other than the air brake. And it's not because I don't want to, it's just because you can't. The velocity is just way too extreme. You can't control the vessel with human input. It's completely impossible. See the ground speed, distance to the base. I guess this doesn't show the temperature. I thought it did. Oh, duh. I guess you have to hit start. Air brake. Close the air brake. More air brake. Close the air brake. See, the distance is getting pretty. Once it drops below 1.5, I kind of feel like that's really close because this velocity just has you there so quickly at that point. And if anybody knows a better way to land the standard DeltaGlider, I'm all ears, because I don't know. I've used the Attitude MFD, but it only has pitch. It doesn't have AOA, so I find it completely useless. If I'm understanding this correctly, it looks like peak heating is past and we're cooling off now. close this out. You see the distance is really coming down, but so is the velocity. Still working the air brake, trying to dial this in. One thing I want to do now too is bring up glide slope. Start thinking about my lineup with the runway. Almost there.
2,500.
Oops. Turn a bit too sharp there.
1,000. 500. 400. 300. 200. 100. 50, 40, 30, 20,
Ooh, whoa,
10.
whoa, whoa. Ooh, slammed the runway pretty hard. This was the XR2. I would not have made that. That was definitely a crash. Otherwise, not too bad. Lined up the center of the runway. Obviously made it to the base. Only major problem there was just leaving that air brake extended while landing. It just brought me down too hard and slammed into the runway. But that's how the DeltaGlider, the standard DeltaGlider, is brought back from orbit. At least that's one method.